one of the principal criticisms that one gets of a liberal individualist society is that it is selfish, that it's not an altruistic society, whereas socialism, whatever flaws it has in terms of efficiency, is a society in which we all look after the weakest, the sick, the old, and so on. Now, what role do you see for altruism in a liberal individualist society?
The altruism is an instinct we've inherited from the small society where we know for whom we work, whom we serve. When you pass from this, as I like to call it, concrete society where we are guided by what we see, to the abstract society which far transcends our range of vision, it becomes necessary that we are guided not by the knowledge of the effect of what we do, but by some abstract symbols. Now, this only symbol which takes us where we can make, tells us where we can make the best contribution is profit. And in fact, by pursuing profit, we are as altruistic as we can possibly be, because we extend our concern to people who are beyond our range of personal conception. This is a condition which makes it possible even to produce what I call an extended order, an order which is not determined by our aim, by our knowing what are the most urgent needs, but by an impersonal mechanism who by a system of communication puts a label on certain things which is wholly impersonal. Now, it's exactly this where the conflict between the traditional law, which is not altruistic, which emphasizes private property, and the instinctive law, which is altruistic, come in constant conflict. The very tradition from a concrete society where each serves the needs of other people whom he knows, to an extended abstract society where most people serve the needs of others whom they do not know, whose existence they are not even aware, was only made possible by the abandonment of altruism and solidarity as the main guiding factors, which I admit are still the factors dominating our instincts. And what restrains our instincts in this respect is the tradition of private property and the family, the two traditional rules of morals, which are in conflict with instincts.
Well, I then have to ask you in specific terms, how would a liberal individualist society deal with such cases as, let us say, a steel worker who's living in a town which is entirely dependent on a steel factory which now closes? How would it deal with somebody suffering from a chronic illness who was incapable, or a mental illness, an even better case in a sense? How would it deal with those two cases?
Well, I must begin what you mean. What do you mean by how does society deal with it? So far as provision of individuals for any collapse of the earning capacity, of course the answer is insurance. We have developed insurance, and need not be social insurance. Any earning person can provide against such elements. We have stopped the development of competitive insurance by bringing in social insurance. But in America, of course, even before general social insurance was general, this development had already gone very far.
But obviously, if people do not insure themselves against something like losing a job, and they then find themselves without any welfare assistance to be able to turn to...
Oh, that I would return to the old poor law. I think a minimum of that kind, every society. I think the main emphasis would be it had to be local provision, not on a national scale. What the poor law did on the local scale in the past. But I haven't finished my story. You see, individual catastrophes to be dealt with this. I don't think there is anything society, in inverted commas, can do against the collapse of a firm, except the increase mobility of labor, largely by repressing the trade unions' resistance. See, if a steel If the steel industry declines, and this manifests itself in the collapse of two great steel industries, the only hope for these workers is to get employment in their own job, a reduction of wages. We must have flexible wages. I think the idea that a steel worker, in the time in which the steel industry was prosperous, has achieved a level of wages to which he now has a moral right, is incompatible with a free society. The idea that you are entitled to the wages to which you have become used, if systematically pursued, must lead to the complete destruction of the competitive market. People must recognize that even as workers they are exposed to the risk, the same risk which every professional man is exposed to, of losing the opportunity to maintain his present standard and having to descend to a lower standard.
But this leads me to the attractions of socialism, because quite plainly socialism would be a very attractive option for someone faced with those circumstances, because it would protect them.
I do question.
Well, what are the other...
These people are in themselves a minority.
Yes, but
the majority believes that this sort can really provide security for all is an intellectual error. It cannot. And all you can do is to try to make people understand that as a general benefit, it is something which cannot be achieved.
But it seems to me, just listening to you on that point, that first of all, socialism would be attractive both to the steel worker who was losing his job out of self-interest, but also to the mass of society who, through the television, through newspapers, would come to feel a certain sympathy with people in this situation, or indeed even more so, sympathy with someone whose difficulties stem from illness. So doesn't socialism appeal to both self-interest and altruism, and in a way that your liberal individualist society somehow fails to do?
Except that if people knew how great the costs were of achieving this ideal in blocking further improvement or even our capacity to abolish extreme poverty in other parts of the world, they would say they have to bring that sacrifice in order to keep the machinery in existence on which the preservation of the present level of wealth in the world depends. That assumes a degree of intellectual understanding which may be unachievable.